I know it's cliche to say it all starts up front, but I'm going to tell you in this episode that it all starts up front. I'll tell you more about it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
She didn't tell not one lie. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars, and we thank you for making us your first listen. Remember, you can go over to the YouTube page that is Locked On Jaguars, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and also hit that bell so you get notifications each and every time we drop an episode. Also, wherever you get your audio podcast, make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you don't miss an episode of Locked On Jaguars. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The Stanley Cup is now in South Florida. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us here every single day. And you can be an everyday. All you got to do is just join us here every single day on Locked On Jaguars. All right, let's get to it. When we land this vessel, we're going to find out what I think about the offensive line. Is it actually good enough, right? And you'll say, Wig, they already addressed it. Well, good. Before that, in segment 2, we're going to talk about the fact that I realize and acknowledge that they did address the offensive line. But it doesn't tell me whether or not they properly addressed the offensive line. So we'll discuss the pros and cons of anything that could happen. But we're going to start at the beginning and tell you why we think the offensive line is the beginning, or it could very well be the end. And that is something we do not want to address. To channel my injured Kendrick Lamar, that's not what you want me to do. Okay. Anyway, the Jacksonville Jaguars have addressed the offensive line this offseason. They re-signed Ezra Cleveland. They restructured Brandon Sheriff. They added Mitch Morse, and that is the real MVP of this conversation as far as the fans are concerned. The fact that they upgraded the center position with a guy who's played at a high level on a team that has played at an extreme high level the past 3 or 4 years. He's 32 years old, but that's okay. Guys like that play for a long time in those short spaces. They also drafted Javon Foster in the 4th round, a player that I really did like or do like out of Missouri. 24 years old. So you have to keep that in consideration that maybe there's a limit to the upside, but as long as he can play, he can play. So to say that the Jaguars knew that they had to do something with the offensive line is an understatement, and they did it. Now, was it enough? How good are they? Let's just go through that real slow. There's a difference between an offensive line being the type of line that can carry a team. And what I mean by that is when things aren't going right, and maybe somebody's just having an off day and you need to get out of a game. There have been times when it appears, and I don't know if the coaches have ever actually said this, but there's been times when it appeared that what happened was the team just decided we need to get behind our line. We need to win behind our line. Don't worry about all these play calls. Don't worry about all this fancy stuff. Let's just line up, knock these guys off the ball, and get us home. That's like when you're up by 2 or you're up by 6 or maybe up by 4, meaning you're not safe from a team being able to score and take the lead on you, but just 6 minutes left and you're on your own 35-yard line. And you need to either score again, which would be nice, and it could happen, we're thinking conservatively, or it would mean maybe you ain't sitting here trying to score, but what you're more or less trying to do is beat the other team down, take the time off of the clock, wear them down, basically snatch their soul from them, right? And eventually it would be nice if you tack on a field goal or a touchdown at the end of that and only leave 50 seconds left on the clock. So all of those things, I don't think the Jaguars are that kind of team. And that's what I envisioned them being. But to the Jaguars' credit, what happened in the offseason was I think everybody around the league smartened up and started paying interior offensive linemen the same money they were paying guys who play on the on the edge of the offensive line, the tackles. Because my guy was Robert Hunt, and I promise you, Robert Hunt broke the bank, man. Robert Hunt signed a deal. I don't blame the Jaguars for not going after that because it was just too high. In fact, I'm going to give them credit. And folks will say, "Why are you giving them credit for something that they're supposed to know?" No, they knew, and they didn't wait till the first day of free agency for them to know that, hey, look, we're going to be priced out of the interior market. Because one of the people that told me that might happen also told me, when I started going down the line with these tackles, with the offensive linemen, and I'm thinking, okay, the Jaguars, and this is before I knew where they were picking, because we started talking about this when the draft order wasn't set, that if they're in the 20s, they're going to be able to find another lineman like Anton Harrison, right? And they're going to be able to find a good, big, beefy guy who can move people and get people out of the way. Well, I was told in the draft process, they're going to be gone. Most of those guys will be gone by 2021, and I'll be damned if it didn't happen. That person also told me that in free agency, a lot of the people that I think are obtainable. In fact, I wanted the Jaguars to get two of them. Well, if the Jaguars assigned the two players, one of them Robert Hunt, the other one I'm going to keep to myself. But if the Jaguars signed two of those guys, they'd have spent about $170 million. And that's just too much money. You can want to do something all day, but being able to go out and actually do what, I did not think those dudes were going to get that kind of bread, but they did. So the Jaguars did the next best thing. They stuck with the guys that they're familiar with. Brandon Scherf's fine. He's fine. And what I started to say was this too. There's a big difference between being a strength. Some people think if you're not a strength, like the scenario I just described is a strength, right? You can just, when things aren't going well at the end of the day, hey man, we need to get out of this half, line up, knock them off the ball, get some first downs, move the ball, see if we can score, and use our running backs, get those tight ends in the game if you have to help out, and mercilessly do to them what other teams have been able to do to Jacksonville late in games over the last couple of maybe 2 or 3 seasons. You recall when the 49ers got the open kickoff against the Jaguars a couple of years ago, and they used almost 14 minutes of the clock and 19 plays? What do you think they did? They ran the football, and they demoralized the Jaguars from the very beginning to the point where the Jaguars started getting personal fouls because they were angry. Ain't nothing like getting bowled over and getting knocked off the ball every single play that makes you want to fight more than what I just described, right? So that's why I believe those teams have an advantage, because that is a strength. If you don't have that, if you're the Jaguars, which they don't have, in my opinion, that doesn't mean that your offensive line is a weakness. It's just, that means it's neutral. It's just not, it's what it is. You're good enough to do whatever and get by, and you're going to depend on play calling and your quarterback and your defense playing well, and game dictation, how the game goes. All of those things are going to allow you to play well. So it doesn't mean you can't eventually get better and be better, right? Over time, as some of the young guys develop and you start to replace some of the players that are there now with younger people. All of that stuff can work. So I want to make it clear, just because I say it's not a strength of the team doesn't mean I necessarily believe it is a weakness of the team, but it could be a weakness of the team if certain things go wrong. Those are the things that I'm going to talk about. One of them is health. The other is if somebody just isn't good enough. And while it's sacrilegious for us to talk about, use the injuries, because we don't talk about them, we think it's going to, create a situation where it might start happening. You don't want to speak stuff into existence. But the one thing that is true is Doug Peterson even said the unit that they wanted to, their number one unit on paper, played one game together last year. What if it happens again this year? We can't keep using things as a crutch, as an excuse, because your best ability is your availability. And when you're talking about 5 different people that have to create one unit, then one guy not being available basically means the whole unit isn't available at full strength. So we'll discuss that in segment 2 here on Locked On Jaguars in just a second. Man, I watched a hockey game last night. Can y'all believe that? I watched, because I love competition, and that's what it is. It doesn't have to be a sport that I watch all the time. It could just be something where there is extreme competition. And man, let me tell you something. FanDuel is the place where you need to be connected to sports that you don't necessarily know about. Like baseball, I like it, but I don't love it. But just because all the sports aren't sporting like you want them to, FanDuel is still there for you, and they're going to keep going for you all this summer. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost of bonus daily. Listen to me. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long, whether it's your favorite sport playing or not. So head over to fanduel.com/locked on and start making the most out of your summer. And it's just going to prep you to get ready for the sports that you love. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, second segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day, and we always thank you for making us your first listen. The Jaguars addressed the offensive line. They did. They know it's a weakness. They knew that they had to get something done. The first thing that they did, they got blessed because Mitch Morse was set free by the Buffalo Bills because they had to make some cuts, and they cut a lot of good players free so they can do a reset. So their reset became our Christmas because Mitch Morse was on the market at 32 years old, but he fit the bill of a dude that is exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars need, and that is a bearded bully. No, his beard has nothing to do with it, but his beard is indicative of the kind of guy that he is, right? He is the bearded bully. We need a dude that's going to keep Trevor Lawrence upright longer than Luke Fortner, who was the incumbent last year, but he better not be starting this year unless he shows a big-time level of improvement. But Mitch Morse has played at a high level. I never watched a Buffalo Bill game over the last 3 or 4 years and said they need a center. I have watched several Jacksonville Jaguar games the last couple of years and said they don't have a center. I have never done that with Mitch Morse. And sometimes what it is the fact that people don't mention your name or the fact that people don't point out you. Sometimes it means you're not hiding. Sometimes it means you're doing a good job. I don't want to notice a center. I don't want to notice. And too many times I have noticed a center being on his backside. I did it with Luke Jokel. I've been doing it with Fortner. I've done it with some guys. I even did it with Ben Barch a couple of times, but we're now talking about the guy who actually gives the ball to Trevor Lawrence, who keeps the first initial most direct contact from being able to get to Trevor Lawrence. And he also is the dude that sets the table for the cutters or the guys that are leaving one side of the formation and going over to the other side of the formation. If there's not a clear path, they get tripped up and they never get to where they're supposed to. That means you can't get pushed back and be in that alley, in that lane, that down the line of scrimmage where those pullers are going to be. They need that free so they can get over there and get to those other people. And when they're not getting to those other people, Travis Etienne is getting tackled or touched at a rate that is the highest in the National Football League on carries by a running back after he gets the football. That's why I said the beginning or the end, because most of those times in all of those offensive plays, Luke Fortner started the play. The play began with him holding the ball. And after the exchange with the quarterback, the play ends with him on his back. So he's the beginning and the end of these plays. Therefore, that position, in my opinion, was the beginning and the end of the Jaguars' playoff hopes. That was the main reason I said we got a problem. And when I said it, I didn't initially know it was mainly Luke Fortner. I thought it was Fortner and maybe one or two other people. But film study is something else. And I didn't do all of it, but the people that I trust tell me, oh, no, a lot of that could be alleviated with the center, dog. A whole bunch of it. Thus, all of the runs to the perimeter on 3rd and short. Thus, the ball being gone sideways. Getting the ball out of Trevor's hand. Moving the pocket. Sometimes you move the pocket. The pocket exists for a reason. You move the pocket because you're trying to keep your quarterback from running into somebody when he steps up. If you can eliminate that, that might be the start of all of this other stuff coming into fruition that we keep talking about the Jaguars are being capable of doing. Mitch Morse, that's why as a person, as a man, he is the dude that most people look at as the key and central figure the Jaguars acquired this offseason. The thing is it enough? Is it enough not only with Mitch Morse in the addition of guys, Cooper Hodges coming back from being injured and now finally having that young developmental tackle for the future, What about Walker Little? What about Cam Robinson? Guys that over the last couple of years didn't have the greatest availability. It's not like they were injury prone, but Cam missed a lot of time for various reasons. And Walker Little even missed some time. Time that could have been used to evaluate whether or not he is a future starter on this team or if he's just a dude that's going to have an entire career of being a swing tackle. All of these things are legitimate questions. Is it okay that all I want them to be on the offensive line is just okay and just a little bit above average? No, it's not okay, but that's what they have. I think the defensive line has a chance to be dominant, and the way that they approach the defensive line, albeit for good reasons, is a little bit different than the approach on the offensive line. See, for me to protect Trevor Lawrence, I'll go through hell and high water and do whatever it is I got to do. Joe Burrow's about to get protected by a few guys up there. I think out of the 3 tackles, like 2 of them are like 6'7", 340 pounds. It's like the big ain't always better. It's a family show, so y'all know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have to have offensive linemen that know how to move too now. So it ain't like the best offensive lines are always the biggest and the strongest. Some of them are the ones that are technically the best. But I've been watching offensive line in Philadelphia look like the biggest and the strongest for a long time. And I've been watching a combination of the lines in Kansas City and places like that where when the games matter the most, they are able to play behind their line. 49ers. And that was one of their weaknesses in certain spots. But they had a great player that they leaned behind. On 3rd and 4th and 1, you knew damn well they're going to run behind Big Williams. And everybody knows that at left tackle. The Jaguars don't have that dude that you say, here, go behind him. I think Anton Harrison has the potential to do that and to be that. But I don't know if he's there yet. And he also has to get healthy. And maybe he missed some time this offseason nursing his injured shoulder. The time that he could have been used to grow and get a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger and actually be everything that I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be great. So the question is, even though they addressed it, and even though we've identified the offensive line as potentially being an issue, is that O-line good enough? I'm going to answer that question for you. I'm going to answer before we go to break. But first, I have to let you know about Locked On Sports Today, man. If you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm going to tell you why being good is a relative term. Good enough for what? Get good enough to make the playoffs? Yes. Good enough to win a championship? I do not know. And I'll explain that to you in our third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. I asked the question as I exited segment 2 of whether or not the O-line was good enough. I'll add another question to it. Are they better? Yes, they are better. Because of the off-season additions, I think they are better short and long term. What I mean by that is short term, I think Mitch Morse, even though he's 32, is going to be an upgraded center, and teams won't be able to get away with just pushing us around anymore. And with Luke Fortner in, that was a weakness. With Mitch Morse in, it might not be a strength, but it definitely isn't a weakness. It's something that you won't think about. And I think most of us would take that as an improvement, is that we're not thinking about offensive line play the way we have the last couple of seasons. Are they better? Long term, yes, because I think the drafting of a guy like Javon Foster, this is the kind of pick they need. I thought they didn't do a good enough job in the 3rd and 4th round, like on early day 3. I just late day 2, early day 3. They used 1st round picks and they've used 2nd round picks. Remember Juwan Taylor, Cam Robinson, Walker that we're talking, Walker Little. Those are all 2nd round picks. Anton Harrison was a 1st round pick. Luke Fortner was a 3rd round pick. So they have used resources. They've signed guys like Brandon Sheriff in free agency. They've traded for Ezra Cleveland. They have used resources. They have tried. My issue is Did they try hard enough? Did they pick the right people? Do they have the right coach? All of those things factor in. Now, I'll give Phil Rauscher a little bit more leeway now than I probably would have been before. I'll give Rauscher a little bit of leeway because I actually do think Anton Harrison was his guy that he wanted, and we got him. You saw why. So that means that from a coaching standpoint, he can identify guys that know how to play. I also give him credit because even though Harrison had a tough start, he came out of the gate against one of the best players ever when Chris Jones moved to defensive end in the opener. You saw him progressively get better as the year went on. He started playing other players that were very, very good players, and he held his own, and then got to the point where you didn't even know he was over there, and you didn't even know they were over there. Once again, we're going back to that quiet stuff. If I don't have to see you or hear you, then that means, hey, you're doing a good job, right? So from the perspective of that, yeah, they've done okay when it turns to that. And so that gives me a little bit of belief that Phil Rauscher knows what he's doing. All right. My question is the resources that they have used, it's still pale in comparison to the resources they've used on the defensive line. So I touched on that a little while ago, and I'll tell you why it's different. And I even brought this up to Trent on draft night during our press conference, Trent Baalke, the GM. I brought this up that it's a little bit different because on your defense, you want 7, 8 guys that rotate, that are versatile, that move around, that cause mismatches for the other team, that don't allow the team to hide. You got guys that can play the run. You have combinations that can do both, and you have other ones that can really, really get after the quarterback. You don't have that luxury when you're building an offensive line because the things that you want your offensive line, the last thing you want, and this is what we just touched on earlier when we were talking about Doug Peterson saying his main group only played together one game. The last thing you want is a whole bunch of different guys playing together on your offensive line. That's the last thing you want. It happens because injuries happen. Sometimes a little fatigue happens. Guy might get kicked out of a game. So you want the continuity to be as close as possible to what, it is from game to game, from week to week, and from day to day. And it's almost counterintuitive to sit here and think, okay, we're going to have 9 dudes, man. We're going to stay fresh and we're going to rotate. Well, that kind of goes against the way offensive lines are built. If you're going to rotate anything, you want to rotate a whole new unit in. If you're going to give somebody a break without maybe not the center, but put other people in, or at least one side and then the other side, or if you rotate somebody in, you're going to move one dude over to another spot and then put somebody in his spot so you keep your best players on the field at the same time. It's a very, very delicate situation, but one that is best when those guys are healthy and it's the same group of people and they are left alone to gel, to get that continuity, that cohesion, and that chemistry. All of those things, the C words that we use when we describe an offensive line. So the approach is understandably different when you're building a defensive line as opposed to an offensive line, because one, by its very nature, well, both of them, you need good to be great. You need great players or good players, but one by its very nature actually benefits from a rotation of great players, where the other one, it is a detriment to have a rotation of players, no matter how good they are, because part of what makes them great is the fact that they're together and they're cohesion and they're one big unit. That being said, I hope what happens is this. This is the hope side of it. This is the plus side. The plus side of it is this: the fact that they have made additions while still feeling like they have stuck with the same group will add what they need in the new additions, but will still not screw up the chemistry that they already have. Now, I know you're probably saying, well, you worry about chemistry when they weren't very good. Because it doesn't mean you need to scrap everything. You can make additions without totally revamping the whole thing and starting all over again. So I think that's one of the advantages that they might have. One of the disadvantages could be, what if Mitch Morse gets hurt and then you're back right at square one where you were before. And now you got all this pressure on that kid that he's probably trying as hard as he can. He's just not strong. So did he get strong? Or can Cooper Hodges play center? Do you have enough? Is Ezra Cleveland going to stay healthy? Is Brandon Sheriff going to go more than a game or two without laying on the ground for 1 or 2 plays and having to leave the game? Is Cam Robinson going to find a reason or find a way to stay on the field as opposed to being injured or as opposed to having to serve an a suspension. All of these things, even if the suspension was a one-off, over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been moments where they haven't had Cam Robinson on the field. Can he stay healthy? Do they have depth that can develop? What does Walker Little show you as a swing guy if they have to depend on him? I'm not worried about Anton Harrison. I'm good right there. Is Ezra Cleveland as good as the faith that they put in? So that's the thing about his contract. You go 3 years, $29 million or whatever. That's pretty decent money. Yeah, it's pretty decent money. And you look at the raw numbers, it's like the Jaguars got a bargain. So them getting a bargain, was that all about their leverage, or was that all about the fact that to them ain't no bargain? Whatever you think is a bargain, that's exactly what he's worth. And if that's what he's worth, then either he's going to play like he's worth that, or he's going to play way better than he's worth because they believe in him. And then it's going to look like a bargain. But the bottom line is, what if you get exactly what his dollar amount indicates he should be getting? Is that going to be good enough? So it's one thing to say, okay, are we getting a bargain? But then you ever bought something on a bargain and then looked at it after, like, you had it for a while, and then you look at the thing that you didn't buy because it was too expensive, and the thing that you bought ain't holding up. It was good for a while, but now you need to move on. See, if you look at your football team that way, you're right back to rebuilding this thing every single year instead of retooling it and moving forward. So I hope the Jaguars' offensive line is good enough to put them in playoff contention. A lot of things have to happen. Are they good enough to be in a Super Bowl situation and have to turn around and tell that line to get them home? I don't think so. But that's where Trevor Lawrence comes in, and that's where the other players, and that's where the defense comes in. Trust me, you don't have to have a great offensive line to win a Super Bowl anymore. But if you have a great offensive line, a Super Bowl is more likely. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports today, man, because it is launched. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports today is here for you 24/7, covering the sports, the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports today and now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Man, y'all have a good day here in North Florida and wherever you are. If you're around the world in the armed forces listening to your favorite Jaguars podcast, we thank you for your service and hope that you continue to tune in. Everybody else, man, check me out here every single day because it's your team every day. As always, we thank you for making us your first listen.